Most attorneys, unless they handle pardons specifically, they may not even know there's a step two to the process, right?
Yeah.
We're the Arms Attorneys. Today we're talking about getting your gun rights back if you've lost them. Stick around, we're going to be talking about the process of pardons or clemency. We're going to be talking about what it means, why it doesn't necessarily get your gun rights back, and everything you need to know if you want to start that process. But before we get rolling, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And to kick things off, what we're talking about is clemency. And this is when you're granted relief by one of our three branches of government. What's common is judicial clemency. That's when a court goes back, opens up a case, dismisses it. There is legislative clemency. We don't see that very often, but theoretically, the legislature could pass a bill that, says this person didn't commit a crime. But what we're really talking about today is executive clemency. That's when the chief executive officer of the state or the United States says, hey, you know what? We're going to grant this person relief. Maybe we restore all of their civil rights. Maybe there was a punishment imposed on them and we're not going to impose that punishment. So it comes in a few different forms. But I think the place to start is, how do we know who to seek and this is called a pardon too. How do we know who to go talk to about, potentially getting relief?
Well, if you've been convicted of a state crime, you have to seek your pardon from the governor of your state. Maybe there's a board of pardons who advises the governor, but essentially you're going to either directly to the governor or to this board, generally appointed by the governor,
Yeah.
depending on state by state. If you've been convicted of a federal offense, and that is what has restricted your rights, then you're going to have to go to the president of the United States. So that's how you know what you're looking at. Federal crime, state crime.
Yeah, and depending on what's going on, I mean, sometimes there's high chances of success on the state level. Federal level, it's not as common. I mean, think of
No.
the hundreds of millions of Americans and the just handful of pardons that are granted each
Right.
year. It's pretty
Unless
low.
Kim Kardashian is abdicating for you, you're going to have a tough time.
But the pardon process on the federal level, let's look at that because a lot of states will kind of mirror this in a way. What you will essentially do is it's done through the Department of Justice, and most states will have some kind of board. And essentially, you're going to be petitioning through this kind of filter. They kind of do this pre-investigation to see, hey, am I going to make a recommendation to the president of the United States? Am I going to recommend that this person be granted relief? Or am I going to, throw this thing in the waistband? And we see that on the state level as well. Now,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of different factors that come up, and we've handled quite a few pardons before. What kind of factors make for a good pardon?
We're looking at things like, other than this one instance, you have a clean criminal history, right? Nothing else going on. You had this one screw up that you really want fixed, but all other indications are that you are good and law abiding. Length of time
Yeah.
matters a lot. I mean, if you got your conviction last year, are you going to get a pardon this year? No. Length of time is a big deal. And the circumstances of what
Yeah, I was
happened.
going to say the severity is an important one. If it's a minor, maybe you're a getaway driver to a robbery, or you didn't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into, as opposed to what if you're the guy holding the gun? I mean, they're going to treat those two things differently.
Absolutely.
And so the last, these come up to need. Another factor that comes up is desperate treatment between, maybe how you were treated or maybe they were kind of being discriminatory. We see that maybe some laws are applied more harshly to you based on your race. That might be a factor in determining whether a pardon should be granted. Has technology changed? Were you convicted based on DNA evidence? I will tell you the DNA science has changed a lot in the past
Gosh, yes.
30 years. So you have all of these different factors out there. So we submit it to this authority, federal level, DOJ, your state level might be a board of pardons and paroles. Now, once it gets to that board, what happens?
Well, the board's going to review it, and your submission is going to be lengthy. It takes a lot. And again, if you are interested to obtain this for yourself, Google just your state, right? Texas, Texas, it's the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Minnesota Pardons Board. I promise I haven't Googled that. That will get you to where you need to go. Virtually every state has an online process and online forms, and it includes a lot. I mean, you're going to have to pull records from the offense itself. You're probably going to have to find police reports. If there's a victim out there still, you're going to have to disclose that person's information. They're going to contact the victim. You're going to want letters from your community about what a great person you are now. All of this, it is lengthy, but they're going to look at all of this information you've submitted and make a recommendation one way or the other. Either, yes, this person should be pardoned, or no, this person should not be pardoned. And sometimes the board can make that decision itself.
Yep.
More often, they're making a recommendation to the governor of your state. and the governor will decide one way or the other. Some states allow the governor to disregard the board's decision.
Yeah.
Some states do not. Some states, the governor has to follow what the board says. It just depends on where you are.
And kind of an interesting thing, and this comes up, and people get discouraged. They submit a pardon packet, for lack of a better term. They're denied, and they just kind of throw their hands up and give up. But what we see, in the real world is repeated petitions over periods of time. Now, there might be limitations on how often you could submit a petition. Texas, it's 2 years. Federal level, it's 5 years. So obviously you got to follow the law. You're not going to be blowing up their mailbox with these things because, legally they're not going to be able to evaluate them. But being persistent and, letting them know, hey, I'm really interested in getting my rights back. A lot of people get discouraged on the first time, and they should keep at it.
Yeah, people get their pardons granted on the third, fourth attempt. It happens. It's a lengthy process. Depending on what state you are in, you're more or less likely to find success. It really just does depend. But unfortunately, should your pardon be granted, that's not the end of the story.
No.
Every state that I have reviewed has a different process for restoration of firearms rights, a secondary process. So you have to get your pardon granted, and then they have to look at this step 2 of your pardon and say, okay, we've granted his pardon, but are we also going to restore his firearms rights? And they can decide no. And if they decide no, you're pardoned, but you still don't have gun rights.
Yeah, it's one of these bizarre things, because when we think of full pardon, that's when they undo the sentence, all your civil rights are restored. But what we see most states doing is they do some form of commutation. Maybe they say, hey, we're not going to impose this sentence, or maybe we're going to give you some of your rights back. But they kind of hold back the gun rights, it seems like, all the time.
Yeah, even if they call it a full pardon,
Right.
most of the time it doesn't include your gun rights.
Right.
You have to then apply it in a secondary system. And, how often does that happen? I'll be honest, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example.
Yeah, it's going to vary state by state.
Because in Texas, when you would submit your request for a pardon from the governor of the state of Texas, for example, you basically have to submit a second pardon along with it saying, I would like my gun rights back. And so it's really important that if you're seeking out a pardon from whether it's on the state level or the federal level, you speak to an experienced attorney, and you got to let them know, hey, a priority of getting my rights back is restoring my Second Amendment rights, my right to defend myself, to keep and bear arms. Absent some specific instructions from their client, I could see that getting overlooked.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think most attorneys, unless they handle pardons specifically, they may not even know there's a step 2 to the process, right?
Yeah. But we hope you enjoy this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please continue to question and comment below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.